Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Ann Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of MamaFuel, the podcast. My name is Ann Ferguson and I am so happy that you are here with me this week because while every week I'm effusive about my guests, this week's guest, Karen Quinn, she has a really special place, not just in my heart, but also in my head and in my spirit. Because when we met about a year and a half ago in a business context, we were in a business mastermind together for entrepreneurs. Karen and I very quickly became more than business sisters. We became fast friends. And she is a person whom I know I can call on at any time if I am sad or scared or really excited and I want someone to be excited with me and not answer with some cerebral something or other. I just want somebody to get the pom-poms out and have some bubbles with me. Karen is that person. She is also an amazing font of wisdom. And that's why I asked her to be here, because there's a lot of stuff going on in your life right now, Karen. And I'm thrilled to get a chance to have one of our regular conversations, but recorded. So Karen Quinn, welcome to MamaFuel.
Oh, thanks so much, Anne. I'm really pleased to be on your podcast reviews. It's brilliant. I love listening to it. So it's a thrill to be a guest.
Oh, yay. Okay, well then let's get started. Can you tell us what your life looks like right now?
So right now, I am officially an empty nester. I have two boys, and last year when we first met, my eldest son was away in Australia and my youngest son was still living here. Now the eldest one is back in the UK, but he doesn't live at home anymore. He's moved out to a flat, and the youngest one is in Australia. So, he's been gone about it's July, so 7 months. He's having a whale of a time, and he's much better at keeping in touch than the older one, which is nice. It's quiet in the house. I'm adjusting to a new lifestyle, really. It's nice to have the freedom to do what I want, kind of when I want it, and not be subject to the timetables of getting the kids to school and back and making meals at certain times of day. But it's kind of weird some days without that structure and that demand on your time. So, but yeah, I like it. You know, as I say, I'm adjusting. I'm finding that there's more time for me. I'm not quite sure what to do with yet, but I'm getting there. At first I didn't like it when they went away, but now I'm like, when my eldest son talked about coming back recently because he doesn't like his newest flat that he's moved into that his flatmates love, I was actually quite horrified.
The potential intrusion into your newly discovered space.
Exactly.
I understand that completely.
Yeah.
So you also have a husband who is sometimes around and sometimes not, because sometimes he travels for work. And you also have two very character-filled big dogs who are also needy. They never grow up, do they? They just...
No.
I just look at my dog sometimes and think, I love you. Can you please just brush yourself and pick up after yourself? It's the picking up bit that I would like to outsource. Feeding would also be handy if you could just learn to feed yourself. And then we'll go and play together. That would be good. All of the good and none of the, stuff that's required.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you had a journey through motherhood, which is one that I often talk about. Not about you specifically, obviously, but one that many of we mamas have, which is to really, really, really want your kids. You so wanted your babies and you had your two boys super close together. And it was not an easy start, was it?
No, it wasn't an easy start. I really, really wanted children, and when I was pregnant 2.5 years before my pregnancy that my eldest son comes from, and I had a miscarriage, but it was really early on. So I hadn't been for my initial scan even at that point. So it was kind of dismissed, like it didn't matter because nobody had ever seen the baby. It was only the pregnancy test kind of thing.
Only you. Only the mama.
Yeah. It only mattered to me, apparently. And my husband felt it too, but he sort of recovered from it much faster than I did. But unfortunately, it took me 2.5 years to get pregnant again. And I found out in between times that I had polycystic ovary syndrome, so I wasn't ovulating regularly. So it wasn't easy to time it right. So in the end, I resorted to a drug called Clomide to help me conceive, and I was very lucky. It helped me on the first month. We knew when the time was, and we nailed it.
As it were.
As it were. And my husband was really pleased because he was knackered, bless him. There is an age gap between us. That's why I said that. But anyway, the reason that my two boys are so close together is because I naturally assumed that I would have problems conceiving again. So I didn't bother with birth control after that. And because my periods were so irregular anyway, I hadn't even had a period when I found out I was pregnant with the second one.
Wow.
6 months later. So, yeah. So it was it was a stressful time because my first son was early. And he was 2 months premature. I was very, very ill the whole time I was pregnant. But I ended up in hospital for nearly 2 months prior to having him 2 months early. And I had quite severe preeclampsia. I nearly died. So I didn't even see him until he was 3 days old. So he was in hospital for 2 months, and I was back at home after about two weeks after the birth, I think it was, because I couldn't bear to stay in hospital anymore. So I was only seeing him during the day. And when he came home, he was really well, he was properly institutionalized in a routine where he was fed on the hour, every 2 hours. And he was having 10 ml feeds. And he was angelic, but I was not coping well. I was severely depressed by this stage because going home from hospital without your baby. So finding out I was pregnant again when there'd been so little going on in that department, and then, and it was so close together, and I still wasn't quite sure I liked being a mum. Although he was very good, I was still a bit frightened of him. Sure. So it was really hard. And then when I had my younger one, my hormones just went absolutely crazy, and I really was properly depressed. But I lived with my husband, but we were alone up here in Liverpool where we live because my family is all from London. So I didn't really have anyone to lean on. The only person that was sort of taking any interest in me apart from my husband was the health visitor, and I was scared to tell her the truth because I felt so bad that I was scared the children would be taken away. So she gave me this test. I think it's called the Edinburgh test, which is a grading system for whether you have postnatal depression or not. And I didn't answer it truthfully, and she said, "You are borderline postnatal depression. I'd like you to go to this club, a support club for new mums." So I went.
Meanwhile, little did she know that you were so far beyond borderline.
Yes. So I went once, and everyone had a touch of postnatal depression. And by the time I left, I felt like I wanted to kill myself. So I never went back there. So I sort of battled on with it for a while. I mean, I did everything for the boys that I was supposed to, but I was thoroughly neglecting myself. And I neglected my home, and I was miserable because my house was a tip constantly because I couldn't be bothered to tidy it up. It was a weird time in life, but eventually I think when my youngest one was about 2, the eldest one, I decided that I would start taking him to playgroup. So it was 2 hours twice a week. I took him to a little playgroup where he was supposed to leave them to get socialised. And he absolutely loved it. And I decided to go to the doctors, and I got some help. I got some tablets, which I took, and she did say they might take a few months to have an effect. But one day, after about 3 weeks, I woke up one morning and I thought, I feel normal. And that was all I needed, because I think I decided in my head that feeling miserable was how you feel when you're a new mum. And I didn't realise it was possible to feel normal and be a parent. So as soon as I had that feeling, I just took myself off the tablets and I started to pick up. So
what would you, if you could go back and speak to beautiful Karen, mama of 2 babies born, I was going to say minutes apart, they're not twins, but almost less than 2 years apart, what would you say to her?
I would say get help. It's okay to ask, because what I now see looking back is that if that health visitor had really wanted to take the babies away, she wouldn't have needed the results of that test to do so. It was clear from my actions, from how I was, from the fact that I was rarely dressed when she came to see me, from the fact that, whenever there was washing around the house, it was always the children's, never mine. There was always a maiden with clean clothes for the boys, but there was never anything of mine on there. It was always, just sort of left until I really had to wash something to wear. I would go back and say take better care of yourself, because now I look back and I bitterly regret not being more conscious during that time when my babies were babies and so precious. So I was only conscious of them. I wasn't able to fully enjoy the beauty of having a baby.
Well, and it, we talk so much, I say the media, social media, books, magazines, you name it, even prenatal classes talk so much about how it's amazing and they smell so good and isn't it lovely, and your milk comes in and you get this rush of hormones, and it's all this sort of fluffy bunnies and glitter rainbows. And my birth story with my first daughter, as you know, was absolutely glitter-free, and there was a glaring absence of fuzzy bunnies. There was just, I literally thought that the floor of the hospital was going to open up and I was going to be sucked into this black void of postnatal depression that I didn't even know that that's what it was, like you, and it was undiagnosed. I was in a hospital. I was on the maternity ward and people didn't get it. So yeah, and I also had this fear, as you did, that if I tell people, they're going to take my baby away.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you were talking, when I asked you what you would say to yourself as a new mama, I want to rush back there and look at her and hold her in my arms and just say, it's so not just you. There are tens of thousands feeling exactly the same way, and it doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't make you a bad mama, and it doesn't mean you don't love your babies. It means there is help. Let's get it for you. Come on.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and unfortunately, it's part of the thing, I think, of being a first-time mum, because I remember walking into the hospital one day when Mike was in the special care unit, and they had done a hearing test on him, which they do as standard on premature babies, but because they can't respond normally, appropriately, they put nodes on their head. And when I walked in, she was peeling them off, and he was screaming. And I mean, he was weenie. I could put his head in the palm of my hands, and his feet didn't come down to my elbows. That's how tiny he was. But he was screaming loudly enough for me to hear him as soon as I walked onto the ward, onto the unit. And I got to the to the door of his room. He was in a separate room at this time. He was no longer in an incubator. And I said, "What are you doing to my baby?" And I knew that it would have been perfectly possible for me to kill her at that moment. This is even though I didn't feel I bonded with my baby. Because that's the thing, you are connected to this child from the moment it's born, no matter what your mind's telling you. No matter what your conscious mind is telling you, your physiology is connected to protecting that baby. And he was just such a good-looking little boy. He really was sweet. And seeing somebody like literally pulling his hair out with these notes, and she said, "Oh, I'm just doing a hearing test." And I said, "But I don't think you are. I think you're hurting him." And I can remember it now, like I was starting to shake, just thinking about how full of rage I was at that moment. And I think that probably was a bit of a turning point for me in beginning to accept that he was mine, because up until that point I thought he'd die. So I really was,
keeping your distance.
Baby. Yeah, I was quite distant. So in a way, that was a good thing, because it made me acknowledge that he was mine, and I would die or kill to protect him. But that's where I was trying to go with it. You as a mum, you would die or kill to protect your child, but somehow you just can't still quite get into that. Oh, I really love him. Doesn't he smell lovely? Everything wonderful, while postnatal depression is going on. And you miss out on so much if you don't seek that help. And the thing is, people are there waiting to give the help, but you have to ask for it, because I think the other side of that coin of having postnatal depression is that you can be a bit of a moody cow, and if somebody says the wrong thing, they know they're going to get an earful from you. So they wait for you to ask for the help before they push it.
Yeah, it's that situation of, it's such a fine line, isn't it, of if someone were to offer the support, you would need to be in the absolute right frame of mind, and it would need to come with so much love and understanding and compassion. Yeah. And you would need to be able to hear it. And it's something I remember when I was in the clinic with Carolina. So her birth was extremely traumatic, and maybe I'll tell the story one day. And I went into shock when after the C-section. And so they whisked her off with my husband, who did all of the things. So he forever tells Nina, anytime she wants to hear the story, that, he was the first to bathe her, and he, got all the stuff out of her nostrils and her mouth, and he cleaned her ears, and he swabbed her eyes, and he helped dress her, and he held her first, and he cooed to her, and he did all those things, right, that I expected to do. And I had no idea, because I was in such shock. I think at one point I had 7 blankets on me, because my body temperature was just dropping so hard and so fast. And I remember just being in that room, and my milk wasn't coming in because it had been a C-section, and she was 2.5 weeks late, and nothing had kicked in. My body hadn't caught up to what had just happened to it. And because of the PTSD that I was going through related to an earlier surgery, abdominal surgery, it didn't know what to do. And so 2 or 3 days later, when my milk finally did come in, I finally started to feel like maybe I could be useful. Maybe I could be her mummy. Maybe I could, And a friend of mine came to visit, a very new friend at the time, Mary. And Mary came and with her husband, who was lovely, and he and my husband stayed with Carolina, and she said, "Let's go outside." And I said, I can't. I said, I can't even walk down the hall. She said, "Let's go outside." And this was in Barcelona. And so we went outside, and it was August. End of August in Barcelona is not a lovely time to be outside for a Canadian who loves the cold. And so we went out, and we sat under these palm trees in front of this beautiful private clinic. And I felt like I had just been released from an airless, hermetic prison. And I sat under those palm trees, and Mary told me the story of when her father had died not long before. And that she used to have these waves of panic and grief that would come over her. And she was completely paralyzed by these panic attacks and by this grief. And everything would go dark, and she was unable to function. And as she explained this to me, I realized that I was having the same thing. And so she was explaining to me how she had coped by breathing through it and knowing that there was always going to be another breath, and knowing that there was always sunshine outside, and knowing that, whatever the things were that she said to me. And that for me, like you with those horrible plasters being peeled off your baby's head, that was the moment where I actually thought, I might not die. I might be able to be this baby's mama. I might stop failing her, because that's how I was feeling at the time, which I suspect, as a mama who was really ill and who didn't get to the end of term, it's something that I've heard before as well, that I wasn't able to carry my baby as long as nature might have wanted me to. And there's guilt tied into it, and there's shame tied into it. And it was, I held on to her so long that they had to come and get her. And she had lost a lot of weight, and my placenta had started to calcify. And I heard all kinds of comments from the surgeon as they were pulling her out, like, "Oh, it's a good job we got her out." And we couldn't have waited any longer. And so I felt guilty because I wanted a natural birth, and like all of this stuff. Right. And then the depression where no one, like there was no treatment. No one, apparently my husband and my mom talked about it. And even then, my mom was staying with us. Even then, somehow that conversation, either I blanked it completely, which is possible, or they didn't find the right moment to have the conversation with me, or the right way to have the conversation with me, because I was so hell-bent on doing things right. And same as you, I would go back and just say, "Oh my God, it's so not you. This is not you. This is not your fault. This is shit happens, and it's happening. So let's get some support around you. Let's get some scaffolding to hold you up so that it doesn't destroy you, and you build that bond with your baby."
Yeah.
It's such a fun.
I'll tell you what did make me bond with him, though, was realizing I wasn't going to have very long on my own with him before the next one came. Suddenly it was like, bang, that was it. I was bonded with him. I was like, "Oh my God, I hardly bonded. I wasn't even sure I liked you, but I really do. And I want to have some special time on my own with you."
Because in 5 minutes, I'm going to have another one.
Exactly.
Well, and your boys, your first from that tiny little wee beginning of not even being as long as your forearm is now a strapping
6'3.5"
hunk of man, right? Like he is a solid, gorgeous, big.
Yeah. He would have fitted in one of his own shoes now when he was first born.
That is incredible. So to any mama of a preemie who is listening to us, there is, oh my goodness, hold on to your preemie hat, because they're going to get so big, right? They have the potential to evolve just like everybody else.
Exactly. He went along. I don't know if they have them there in Switzerland, but they when you have to take them to clinic here, and they have centile charts for where they're supposed to be.
The growth curve, yeah.
So he was way below his curve until he got to, I think it was 14 months old, and he suddenly discovered the joy of food. And he started to grow and eat, and he didn't stop doing it either. He still hasn't. He's 23 now, so I think he's stopped growing finally. But he seemed to grow. He crossed over his centile and went above it within the next 6 months after that.
Wow.
So, yeah. So,
wow. So I wonder his bones could keep up with it all, right? He was
really
wild.
Yeah.
And it's fun and exciting.
Yeah, it was alarming when we went to, he had an accident when he was about, I think he was 14 or 15. He went go-karting and he crashed and broke two of his fingers. I think it was, broke his thumb, and he also managed to break his little finger. But he was really tall then. And I remember the nurse saying to me, "This is his x-ray and this is what's happened. And look how soft his growth plates still are. He's still going to grow a lot, It just gave me this look of pity.
Because he was already towering over you, I should say.
Yeah, he was. And he was already about 5'10" or 5'11" by then.
Amazing. Amazing. So yeah, any mamas of preemie babies, take heart, because they have the potential to grow so much. Yeah. So from those beginnings, you then threw yourself into mothering with every single iota of your everything, right? From the beginning, when you kind of set the tone in a way of washing all of their laundry and making sure they were fed. And then on the Karen front, it was neglect on the physical front, on the emotional front, on the social front, on the food front, on the clothing front, on the house front, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did that last?
I made life really hard for myself for a long time.
What does that mean?
I'm just trying to think, like, I'm still trying to break some of those bad habits. Nutrition wise, I think I've got it right, but because I have polycystic ovaries and I had neglected to eat properly for such a long time, the weight's not coming off me yet. So I eat much better now. I eat decent meals at decent times a day. I'm not so likely to go and grab something from the baker's that's pre-made, so I don't have to cook. So, I do eat proper meals now. But really finding the boundaries for myself turned out to be much more about my husband than my children. My husband said something to me very early on, I think possibly when I was still pregnant with Michael, which was, when the children are born, the state of the house is going to be much less important than their happiness. And I took that really to heart. I think probably he must have said it to me when I was pregnant and feeling very hormonal, because just like lots of my friends, for example, would let the kids play all day and then they have tidy up time an hour or so before the husband comes in. And I didn't do that. I just let him see the glorious time that the children had had every single day. And it was only probably 4 years ago that I started to feel like, you know what, I really need to do a bit more for me and make this home more about me, because I'm not a lodger in my own home. I should be making the rules, not following them, and started to improve things. So it took me a long time really to dig myself out of that. Interestingly, when my youngest went to school full time, so he was 4 when he started school full time. So when he was 5, I started a nursing course, which had been my childhood dream, and for various reasons, I hadn't pursued it until after I'd had a career break to have kids. I lasted for about, it was nearly 6 months, and I realised that Matthew was really having a hard time adjusting to me not being there all the time. So I took a break from my uni course, and I took another year off, putting everybody else first except me, and then I went back to uni. And when I went back, we were sort of out of the course being in university and into the workplace mainly. So it used to bother me when I got home and the house wasn't tidy after I'd done a day's work. So suddenly when I was working full-time and studying full-time and being a mum and a wife and everything else, that was when I started to decide that the house was really important and had to be clean at all times, because I just couldn't bear coming home to a dirty house. So then I had the guilt of the fact that I put my husband through that for 5 or 6 years. So I really beat myself up and set myself emotionally back quite a bit going through that. So yeah, it's like I really lost myself to wanting to make everyone else happy before me for more than 10 years.
And that was probably a pattern that set in long before you became a mama, right? These kinds of things are things that we learn to do in our families of origin or in our social situations of origin at school or with friends to keep ourselves safe, right? Whether there is what externally might be perceived as danger or not, in order for us to get some of our needs met, a need met, something, we do that. And it doesn't necessarily reflect that we had a horrific childhood. I know there are a lot of those. And I think the more challenging the childhood, the deeper the groove of I'm going to keep myself safe and get my needs met by not having any and taking care of everybody else. So hopefully then I'll be safe. Hopefully then I'll be attended to. Hopefully then, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just whatever, just me. And then you hit motherhood and all of this stuff, all of this stuff that you've organized your life to not have to face into suddenly is right there in the shape of the two little beings you love the most in the whole wide world. And it's staring you in the face all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, looking into that part, which I'd sort of not brought into the conversation before, I did have a very traumatic childhood and was very determined to make sure that my children did not experience the sort of trauma that I had. So I was probably way overcompensating by not having any boundaries and rules. And in a way, I think that's part of the reason why my eldest son needed to go away. I'm sure that the boy, they never had this conversation with me, but intuitively I feel like the elder one went away because he needed to find some rules and structure for himself, because I didn't really impose any. And then the younger one was so close to me because I never told him off. I always praised him. I always did everything. He needs to go away so he could find himself, but for a different set of reasons. So, and they're lovely. I don't feel that I've failed them in any way. I think that the fact that they're brave enough to go and travel is good, but their triggers for going in the first place, if you like, are quite different to each other. And my husband gets upset because next door I've got two boys who I think one's a couple of years older than my eldest and the younger one's 1 year younger than my youngest. But they both still live at home. And my husband's head just says to me, like, why don't our boys still live here? What have we done wrong? And I'm like, we haven't done anything wrong. We've shown them that there's a world out there that needs to be explored. And, we've whatever their triggers are for going, they're having a fabulous time. They're going to look back on their youth and go, wow, that was fab.
Yeah. Mom was amazing. She was there all the time. And look at her now. Look at her expanding. So let's talk about that. So you went from being very much in service to your kids, briefly in the nursing profession, and then you moved from the nursing piece to an overall more holistic healing piece through aromatherapy and aromatology, and then perfumery, which is what's gotten you to when I met you, because you were pursuing what our episode 18 guest, Julie Creffield, calls big fat stupid dreams. Because her big fat stupid dream when she was very overweight was to run the London Marathon, and she did it. And so now she talks about these, quote, big fat stupid dreams that she keeps absolutely nailing every single time. She's amazing. And so you have had this great big dream and have had a long road to go from being mama of service to your husband, of service to your kids, of service to the community around you, your dogs, whatever, to now being the woman that I know who stands in the middle of all of her crap, just like all of us, but who stands with your dream and who has really, in the last year and a half, you've really gone through this incredible, French is coming to me, éclosion, which is when the caterpillar becomes a butterfly, the actual, whatever that the verb is for that in English. In French, it's éclosion. The progression from beautiful caterpillar to this exquisite butterfly, which has required you to claim physical space in your house and ask for actual time and set boundaries, which when you're 50, all of a sudden saying to the 3 grown men in your life, guys, this is now my office. Please move out. These are now the times that I need space and silence. Please respect that. And negotiating, finding new ways of different relationship. That has been huge. What's that been like for you? Because from the outside, it's been like, it's been really wild to watch.
It's been pretty wild to be part of, actually. Yeah, it's weird because it never happens in a sensible way. So I don't sit down one day and think, right, today I'm going to do this and say this. It's generally like I started off squirreling a bit of space for myself. So the room that I work from, where I'm sitting today, is what we used to call our playroom. So it's a room, it's 15 foot square, this room. And when I first started working in here, I had a desk over in that corner. So I faced the wall, sat in the corner, and that was my desk. And anyone who walked into the room could see what was on my computer screen immediately. And so quite often my husband would walk in and say, "What are you doing?" And I bet he wouldn't say it until he was standing near me, so I knew he could see what I was doing. And he used to really, sorry, the doors are banging because we've got everywhere, all the windows are open. So I never felt quite in charge. So one day I decided that I didn't really like sitting facing the corner and I wanted to be near the window. So I've got more natural light. So I moved my desk and turned it so that my screen faces me. So you have to be being really intrusive if you're going to come and stand next to me. And I felt better. So it gave me a bit of like more, because I'm looking at the room all the time like I own it. And then my husband, who had been on the long-term contract at that point, started working from home and decided to set his desk up in the corner over there. So, and he types like he wants to murder the keyboard. So it's really noisy. And he also has a habit of when he's got something to say, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, he needs to say it and you have to stop and pay attention. And it's not, and I'm not saying that as a criticism of him, because actually it's a quality I like about him. He's not afraid of owning the space that he's in. But it started to get on my nerves because he was in my office that I'd claimed for myself. So I told him that I needed him to go upstairs into the office. And he said, "Well, I decorated that room for you. It's supposed to be your office, but you don't like sitting up there." And I said, "Well, I can't sit there now because I've got all my perfume oils and everything, and there's a carpet in that room and blah, blah, blah. And when my business takes off, there's going to be oils and, I don't want to risk spillage and I don't want to be carrying boxes filled or unfilled up and down the stairs constantly. So I need to be downstairs now. And this room is a much better room. I won't need to take a unit." So I gave him, a very well-constructed argument. And 3 or 4 months later, he was still here in this room. So I was like, right. So it's quite a process to get him to move out. But through a series of different discussions and some fairly strong arguments, which again is new because we never had an argument until a couple of years ago. I had arguments and shouted frequently, but he did not argue back with me. He just used to laugh at me and walk away. So because it generally what was happening is I would stay quiet for so long that I would suddenly blow up out of all proportion at a stupid thing, and that was the only way he could cope with reacting. So now we were having arguments because I was expressing myself and basically starting them while I was still in control. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. It's been interesting as well watching my eldest son, because he's come back during this process of me claiming my space. So he came back from where he was in New Zealand, and I had some boundaries, and that was new for him. So the whole family dynamic, because he moved in with us for 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks, I think it was, before he went back out, was quite tense. Because my son would say to me, "The way you speak to Dad now." And I was like, "Have you ever heard me argue with him before?" "Well, no." "Well, this is why." It's like 20 odd years has been pent up, and I have to make absolutely sure he's understood me. Yeah.
Well, it's about, we all have to learn at some stage. We don't have to, but for our mental health, I would urge everyone listening, if you haven't done it yet, to start playing with boundaries. And that's what it has looked like from the outside, is this you flirting with the idea that maybe you could have some space that's yours. And flirting with the idea that maybe you could have a business that could make money. And flirting with the idea that maybe you could be the one to support your family as your husband retires. And you flirting with, no, you're not flirting. You living into the idea that with these incredible products that you're now making, all of which are based on your deep knowledge of aromatology, aromatherapy, and perfumery, and are amazing. I literally just got some today and I can't wait. They're right here. For anyone who's watching, the envelope came today. I got my very own pocket potions and I'm not opening them because I'm waiting for Nina and Amelia to come home, but can't wait. But you are, your dream is, we have in our business mastermind, we have a hashtag that says move over Joe Malone because you're going to do amazing things. And what a transformation from, I'm just going to sort of chip away at this space and just take this little space in the corner where everyone can see what I'm doing and I can't see what's going on behind me, to owning this room and knowing that logically it makes sense for you to be here and blending all of these oils and doing all of these, creating these exquisite products that you're shipping around the world from your playroom / now office, is like, that has taken it's been a dance first with yourself, and all of the big emotions that have come up around that. And then in your marriage and as in your role as a mama and even in your friendships and the way that you now, sparring sounds aggressive and I don't mean it that way, but in the sense of when you are practicing, you do have that sparring kind of mentality of, I'm going to try this and see if this works. And oh, that didn't feel so good. I'm not going to do that again. And it has been a real joy to see you do that, of, taking up that space and saying, you know what, I am here and I am this big and my dreams are that big and I need this much space to just mix the damn things. And, all the things. It's been amazing.
I know, it's so exciting. And next is, so I've got this 15 by 15 foot room, which is now mine. Husband is now upstairs on his computer.
And also he has his own space, right? Which must have benefits to him as well, right? Because he has been on this journey with you and that's a lot of adapting for him. And this is stuff that cracks marriages wide open and you guys are still there. So it's great.
Exactly. Yeah. But the next step is where there's, in a couple of weeks' time, we've got someone coming to build a shed base. So everything that's currently stored in the garage can move into a shed in the garden. So I can make the garage into my clean room. So properly, no dogs are allowed in there, nothing. Because at the moment when I need to do bottling and labeling, I have to do a full clean down of this room. Like, like there's been an alien
and dander and all of that.
Yeah. So, because it's open to the house, so I have to make sure it's absolutely all pristine every time I'm going to do a bottling exercise. So I'm going to make the garage into my clean room. So I only go in there for packaging, and nobody else ever comes in there.
I can see you in your with your hairnet and your white suit and the air inflow and outflow turning on and off to make sure that no fur comes in when you walk in and all that stuff.
Yeah. So
amazing. So during the time that you had your boys at home, I'm really curious to know the answer to this. There must have been a place where you had fuel. You must have found some MamaFuel somewhere, because otherwise it's just not workable. Where did you find your MamaFuel?
I didn't. I really. I think my best place for fuel when the boys were still at home was taking the dogs for walks. So I had to get out of the house to have anywhere to reclaim any mental space for myself.
And nobody going, Mummy!
Exactly, yeah.
Where's my little Mummy?
Yeah. Yeah, really, literally, for that first 10 years especially, I was always on patrol. Always on duty.
24/7, 365.
Yeah. Because there was no one else. I didn't have my mum living near me. Well, you know what that's like. You haven't got family support network. So if we had babysitters, they were paid for. But then I would be out for a meal or rarely out to the cinema with Ted. So I still wasn't on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about now? Because you're still a mama. Your boys are, and there have been also ups and downs of both of your boys going to the absolute furthest place they could go in the world, and communication not always being what you wish for, and dynamics shifting, prompted by you and some not prompted by you because they're growing up. So where do you find your MamaFuel now?
Now I like, I think the thing is that's where I'm still adjusting, because I'm still finding that space. So sometimes it might be that I've invited friends around, and I'll go and make a beautiful meal and spend hours and hours in the kitchen just pottering and making something lovely, because that makes me happy when I want to do it, particularly when it's like a special meal.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same as having to go in the kitchen at 5 o'clock and put the family tea together and make all of the decisions, only to have them say, "Well, I didn't want that."
Is this what's for dinner? Is that all?
Exactly. Yeah. So I love to get in the kitchen sometimes. I like to get in the garden. Gardening was a big one for me. I did used to go out in the garden sometimes, but I'd often do it instead of housework, not as well as. So I still wasn't keeping the house tidy, even if I was on the move and being active and doing stuff. But yeah, gardening makes me happy. Now I think reading and still walking the dogs is good for me. So I keep saying I really want to try yoga. I'm getting towards it. I'm getting better at meditation, but yoga, I've done a few goes of following a video, but I think like now that I've finally got my products out there and I've done the thing that I was working towards for such a long time, I'm going to go and find a class and go at least a couple of days a week, because something I've wanted to do for such a long time and not. So
good. And when you find the right place, which might take some tries, it's always, and you are such an expert at listening to yourself and of knowing what feels right or not. When you find your yoga home, I used to say of the studio that I would go to here, where I did my teacher training in Geneva, that it was my second home. It was literally the place where I would just go and be like, oh my God, thank God I'm here. Yeah. Oh, and it would be for the yoga. And then I would hang out after because I didn't want to leave because it was my place, right? It was a place where I got to go. And the woman who owns and runs that studio will forever have a place in my heart because it was my other home. It was where I got to be me, not mama, where I got to be me, exploring new things and growing. Well, I could talk to you as ever, forever. And I will. I'm lucky I get to talk to you anytime I want.
Yeah.
But before we bid farewell to everyone who's still listening, where can people find you? And these pocket potions, if you're not watching on the YouTube channel, you're missing the most gorgeous metallic dusty pink envelope ever. I've never seen such beautiful bubble wrap before. I'm very excited. But Karen has just launched, finally, pocket potions, which they're like your support posse in your pocket for any time you need anything. And we have a particularly tight connection to Karen's pocket potions because my girls each had a prototype of 2 of these potions, one to help with anxiety for Amelia and one to help with confidence for Carolina. And they still love those little prototypes that you made for them.
Yeah.
So anyone can now find the pocket potions on
www.karen-quinn.com.
And that's Quinn, QUINN.com.
Yes.
And honestly, this is not the point of this podcast, but run, don't walk, because Karen blends these with her own exquisitely beautiful hands, thanks to her unbelievably talented, like proper perfumery trained, like no joke, nose. And they're from heaven. And it's really hard for me not to open these right now and bust into Focus, which is the one that I need the most right now. Focus. But I can't wait to do it tonight. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of MamaFuel. And I look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Oh, you're so welcome, Anne. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join us, go to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook and make sure you say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate and leave a review. Every comment helps, and it is always a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.